So on Friday, we had the big announcement from Kennedy about what he's planning on doing. I don't think it's really that obvious what he was planning on doing. This unity ticket that he's formed with Trump, it's not entirely obvious. So I thought it'd be worth us taking some time today to dissect exactly what's really going on here. What was the compromise? What is this unity ticket? And why is it that the Polymarket question is considered to be contentious? What do you think, Lucas? Should we talk about this today?
Absolutely, because what we're seeing, I look around and I see headlines that Kennedy has withdrawn from the race. He hasn't withdrawn from the race. He is still on the ballot. He was very clear in his address, and we hinted at expectations of something of this ilk happening because the Democrats are absolutely playing with fire whenever they started to try to deny all of the third party candidates access to ballots. And because I also have heard rumors that the likes of Jill Stein and Cornel West are also considering doing the same thing. And so by campaigning means to go around the country, to get on the back of a railroad and get on the old caboose and wave your top hat and kiss babies, or sit on your back porch and tell the country what your policies are doing. But to be in the race is to have your name on the ballot. And so to stop campaigning is not the same as withdrawing from the race. And Kennedy is not
Well,
withdrawn.
and yeah, and he had a very specific thing in his speech on Friday. He said, "I am not terminating my campaign." The exact words that he said, and I wrote it down. I remember because you and I were having this, side discussion, and I was even at the point where I said I'm willing to make some small friendly wager that he doesn't drop out on Friday, because I just didn't see that that was the logical termination of what he had been doing. I don't think he was ever intending to run a spoiler campaign. And, whatever happened on Friday, I just didn't think it was going to be the end of what he had been working so hard to do.
Well, and I also had noticed that Kennedy had, and we got into this in our conversation. I had noticed that Kennedy had said that he was, the question was, what did he drop out? And I said, well, he has stated to his supporters that he was in it till the end. But, but he can stay. I knew that he could stay on the ballot and yet begin to support Donald Trump. Like, even for him to take a call from Donald Trump was like drew tons and tons of attention in the wake of the Trump assassination attempt. And so for him, and we had also heard and knew at that point, because well, we knew months ago that Donald Trump had approached Kennedy as being his vice president, and that Kennedy said, no, I'm going to, again, we knew that, he said, I have my own vision of the future of the country, and I want to, I've also, have a relationship with my supporters and those people who have gone out to drum up signatures for me to get ballot access in all these states. It's also very important to fight the lawfare that the Democratic National Committee has engaged in trying to remove or keep me from the ballot, to rob the electorate of so many states in the union. And so we knew that those things were important to him, but at the same time, he could thread a needle and both stay on the ballot and fight that battle there, but also turn his support and his voice to the common cause that he has with the Trump campaign. And when we heard Donald Trump give his or have his long conversation with Elon Musk, like, I was even more impressed that it seemed to me that they both had an understanding, that that they were in agreement that of getting the United States out of wars, and yet they also both they both support Israel, which is where there is a huge break from the Democratic campaign, or from the Harris ticket in that regard. And so it became apparent to me that they had a lot in common, and that in having a conversation with Donald Trump and understanding his nuanced positions are much deeper than his trolling lines that he puts out on Twitter or in his campaign speeches. Um, I could definitely see an opening for Kennedy and Trump to work together. And it also became probably much more of a bright window from the Trump vantage point with regards to picking up Kennedy in the wake of Trump's COVID policies, and changing the narrative from like, this is what the Trump administration did, to this is what big pharma did, and this is a problem with big pharma. And in picking up Kennedy and his outsized voice that has from even before COVID been a warning voice about big pharma and the outsized lobbying power that they have. um, that's a big pickup and a pivot for, or an opening for the Trump campaign to pick up both those voters who were nonplussed with the previous Trump administration, and how things went down there. Um, so
Well, hold on. Let's bring this back just for a second, because I think we need to at least try to understand what's really going on here, which I'm not even sure we've gotten to the bottom of just yet. We were looking at this, right? This particular Polymarket question, and it just so happens that this one has been resolved to yes, which I disagree with. I don't think this is correct, and I don't. This gives me a little bit of pause on Polymarket as far as how does this actually work? Like, who gets to decide whether these things are correct or not? I think that there's a missing component of decentralization on Polymarket, and this actually makes me a little bit less interested in this as a as a thing to do. Like, I still would like to start making some predictions doing this stuff, so I have an inkling to play with this, but I feel like maybe something's wrong here, because this has been resolved as the outcome of yes, that he dropped out. So if you look at what has really happened here, and I think going through the map and the discussion of what Kennedy has instructed people to do, this is going to be a bit of a nuanced conversation. So if you look at this map, right, anywhere there's a yellow state, essentially what's happening here is Kennedy has said, I don't think I can win these states. And if I stay in the race, there is some chance that the vote would get split in a way that would hand the election to Harris, and that he's not interested in being the spoiler candidate for Harris. And so, in the formulation of the Unity ticket, what they're doing is they're saying, if you live in certain states, you should vote for Kennedy. If you live in certain states, you should vote for Trump. And the intention here is to deny the election to Harris. Essentially, Kennedy has said that the Democrats have played this game so poorly that they have stifled the process of our, free and fair elections, to the extent that, he wants to say this isn't right, and the only alternative is to vote with the party at this point that is allowing a process to actually occur. So in these yellow states, Kennedy is saying your vote for me would be better cast for Trump. If you're in a red state, your Trump vote won't mean anything, because Trump is going to carry these states regardless. They're so strong for Trump that there's no chance that Harris could ever carry them. So, voting for Kennedy actually allows for the establishment of a third party by, getting up to this 5% threshold. And then in the blue states, these ones are states that, Trump has no chance of winning. Like, there's no way that California or Minnesota is going to go for Trump. So a vote for Kennedy here is much more well placed than voting for Trump. So that's the disposition of like what the electorate has been asked to do. And then this is the resulting state dispositions of how the actual vote goes down. So I think that's in a nutshell what has occurred. And that's why I don't agree with what has been said on Polymarket, because Kennedy is still on the ballot. He's still asking people to vote for him. And in some ways, this would likely result in Kennedy getting more votes than if he had kept his campaign intact in the way that they were running it prior to Friday.
I agree. I don't. In fact, maybe it's a good time to go throw some money down on that poll. But that is a good question of how that gets decided. But Kennedy has certainly not dropped out of the race, and that he is not campaigning anymore. Like the question on Polymarket may have better been phrased: will he remove himself from the ballots, or will he will he cancel? I don't know. I don't know, because he's also not he's not done campaigning, if you want to split that hair, either. He's now campaigning with Donald Trump. And it, you know, there's this narrative that voters in America are stupid. There nothing could be further from the truth, or also that people don't vote for their own interests. Nothing could be further from the truth. And Kennedy understands that. And he understands that voters all across the United States, it's a complicated story, but are going to look around, and those who support him are certainly going to look at what the possibility of Trump winning in their state is versus the Trump of versus Harris winning in their state, and will either vote for him as a message that that opens the door for him being automatically included on the presidential ticket in the future, or else a vote for Trump's to ensure Trump's win in November.
Well, I guess it somewhat speaks to the ambiguity of language, right? I mean, it sort of hinges on what does this phrase mean, right? Because this is a fairly obvious, reference to this particular political candidate. This is a very, obvious clause before November. But what does drop out really mean? Like what did it mean to drop out? I highly contest that this question is resolved correctly, because he certainly has not dropped out. He is on the ballot. He will be getting votes. He is asking people to vote for him in the election of 2024. So this maybe was just so poorly phrased that there's no real way that it could possibly be resolved in the correct way. And I don't really understand how in Polymarket this resolves, right? So it's like, if it's like it says, this market will resolve to yes if Robert F. Kennedy officially announces his withdrawal or is confirmed to have withdrawn from the presidential race. That just is not what happened on Friday, and I think that that's the thing that we need to dispel here, and try to bring clarity to, is that this is not actually what occurred. And I take issue with Polymarket resolving this to yes.
Well, they're gonna have to change that at some point. They also have a long window of in which they can change that between now and November the 5th. But
Do they? I mean, it said that it's resolved. So, I mean, is there anything left? I mean, maybe I don't really understand. Like, did this already pay out? Because it seems like it's done, resolved, and the outcome is yes, and it's got the blue check mark and whatever. Like, I don't even know if you can still vote the other direction.
I don't know. Well, it's
See, and
incorrect.
we got to get somebody from Polymark to come on the show.
I would love to hear what Polymarket's take on this is. But if I had been voting, I would have voted that Robert Kennedy is a man of his word. I'm and with nuanced opinions, but had been very, very direct in speaking with his supporters and saying that he was in it until the election. And he has not dropped out of the election. He's dropped out of the campaign, but not the election. So that that Polymarket has presumes to that the question of a campaign is more important than being on the ticket or being elected. I don't know. It's gone from, if that's the case, then it's just then this is a tabloid rather than a serious question.
So I think the issue here is how do you resolve these types of questions, right? Because it ultimately comes down to the details of how you arrive at an answer, right? So there's some nuance in here about how this particular question is dissected, right? In the event of any extenuating circumstances, and the primary resolution will be an official information from RFK Jr. I think in this particular instance, right, it should have been ask RFK if he believes that this is what he did, and just like get a statement from him. I mean, I think it would have been better press for Polymarket to go to the candidate particularly and say, "Do you believe that this outcome of resolution to yes is correct? And if not, why not? Like, what did you really do?" Because if that's what's required here, or that was what was said, then it should have been a statement from RFK particularly about what he's really doing. And I think if Kennedy were queried about this particular question, maybe this would be an interesting post we could maybe perhaps get him to engage on, would be about whether
And
this question, if he believes it resolved correctly.
well, and absolutely, because think about also, his stated goal of getting 5% of the electorate of the popular vote in this election, so that because he said, I'm in it to win, but there's also the goal of getting 5%. And now that he is working with the Trump campaign, what does that mean in red states in which the Democratic vote is nothing? So in Wyoming with 800,000 votes now, whereas if he had been running against Trump, he might have gotten 20,000 votes or maybe 40,000 votes, and the Democrats might get 10,000 votes. In Wyoming, he might pick up 400,000 votes now. And so that's also part of the genius of what he's done, because there's a lot of really red states. Oklahoma, he might have gone from 60,000 votes to 200,000 votes.
Absolutely, and that's why it, to me, is a bit infuriating that this resolved the way it did, and that the narrative out there is being said this particular way, because it sounds like it's capitulation. And I think in reality, it's the opposite here. There's kind of a quid pro quo that has occurred. I think that in some ways Trump feels like during the original term of his administration, and we brought this up as well during Operation Warp Speed, I think he has some regret about how things played out, and that he wished he'd have done things differently. So I think in some ways this is Trump is learning some stuff, that he's made some mistakes and he wants to do things differently. And I think in this particular instance, he has said, I have a lot of respect for this particular individual, and I would really like to have him on the team. And since we've come to this agreement, here's how this is going to play out. And I'm I think it's a very interesting place to be in politics, as far as historically in the United States. When have these types of things occurred? I think they've been somewhat rare, and I think it's interesting to see Kennedy and Trump essentially saying that the Democrats have not been playing a game where this would be recognizable to the way that we've run our country in the past. It has definitely been Kennedy's criticism of the Democratic Party that people who have traditionally been a part of that political party wouldn't even recognize what's going on today. And I think it started a while ago, but it was very evident when Bernie Sanders tried to run, and this exact same thing happened to Bernie Sanders. I'm shocked that there wasn't more of a reaction in the same way that what Kennedy is saying. Maybe it's just gotten that much worse.
Well, I think it has gotten much worse, and we've seen that with the abuse of the judicial system, and um, the amount of money that the DNC is spending in questioning the signatures of smaller parties, and this also goes for Jill Stein and the Green Party, and Cornel West and the Reform. Is it the Reform Party? So, and I think that we might also see the same moves made by the Trump administration towards Cornel West and Jill Stein, because I would also say that Donald Trump agrees that the two-party system. I mean, he has fought the Republican Party from within the Republican Party, and has managed to wrestle away control of the Republican Party from his word rhinos, Republicans in name only. And by that, he also is supported by Make America First, and part of it is, in the two-party system, the American electorate has long been abused by politicians who promise to make hard decisions with regards to blue collar America, and bringing I don't know, bringing treasure back to blue collar America. But then when it comes to it, they do so by taking from the rest of the world. This is the whole globalist conundrum. And so the rich in America have kept their position by controlling both of the parties and creating an oligarchy that abuses the narrative, and keeps the iron from ever coming to rich American feet. So I think that the other party. I mean, he also, let's not forget the Libertarians. We might see Chase Oliver. I don't know about the Libertarians. They're a whole different bag. But he did
well, if you recall, there are certain Libertarians who disaffected from Chase Oliver. We did cover that, right? I mean, Kennedy was actually put forth by certain of the Libertarian state parties.
I mean, and that's, I think the nature of the Libertarians is to I don't know, always have their eye on the window and the door anyway. But Trump certainly made a case for his vision, and Bobby Kennedy both, in attending the Libertarian convention and speaking there. So, but it would be interesting to see if he actually courted those other candidates by engaging in a narrative as to what position he would offer for them in his cabinet. This is something else that I found very interesting with the alliance, the Unity Party, is understanding that there are cabinet positions that can be seats of power for other parties who have their smaller or their niche agendas. And Bobby Kennedy's concern for health and big pharma, there's plenty of places in the Trump cabinet in which he can further his agenda in fighting what he sees as injustice, and change the system from there.
I think if you needed more evidence that Kennedy is not out of the race, here we go. Here's another thing happening for the Kennedy campaign. It's like the Reform Party is now just endorsed Robert Kennedy for 2024. Like I really think it's time to get Polymarket speaking publicly about what is being said in this resolution, because if we're resolving to outcome yes, there's clearly a problem with this platform, and I now take issue with it until they come out and say something about what's really happening here.
Well, at Polymarket, and ask them what's up, and ask them if they'll come on. By the way, Cornel West is with the Constitutional Party. I said Reform Party, but that's Bobby's. Well, very interesting things here. Anything else that has caught your eye? I do think we should also talk a little bit about the address that And I'm very intentional in calling it an address rather than a speech. I think we have seen a lot of speeches from politicians, and the difference to me is a speech is written by somebody else and follows a lot of party lines and is maybe a little less genuine than the address that Kennedy made on Friday was one of the greatest political addresses that I have seen in my lifetime. It's the only one that comes to mind in which I don't know, it was both moving. I could tell that that Bobby Kennedy was that he, you know, was racked with emotion. Um, it was just impressive.
And
It,
I do agree with you on that, Lucas. I took the time to listen to, as you said, his address to the nation, or what Kennedy spoke about on Friday. And it was very impactful. You know, it was a very long message. And the way I described it was the content within the message was very solid. It was very real content. And I was surprised at what he had to say. You know, a lot of people criticize Kennedy because of the way his voice is. And that's not his fault. You know, he kind of has that raspy voice. So for some people, it's kind of hard to continuously listen to him for such an extended period of time. But if you actually take the time and listen to what he has to say, it is so impressive, and the extent of what he's actually willing to come out and say about the different things that he believes in. And that's one of the things that I think is going to become very apparent with his um, kind of association with Trump, is that it's going to give him that platform of more recognition of his speech. You know, Trump's going to allow him to go up on stage and say what he wants to say and spend as much time as he wants to spend up on stage, you know, talking. And that, you know, even in CNN, I think they you know, blocked away from Kennedy's speech when he was starting to talk about some of his messages. And, you know, to have the media, you know, we've seen it so much how they try to subsidize and control what everybody sees and what everybody believes. And they have done that with Kennedy. They've tried to control the narrative with Kennedy. And I believe that they won't be able to control it so much with Trump on Kennedy's side.
yeah, prostitution is real. There was also something else in the speech, you know, and part of what is I think makes it more apparent what Kennedy is trying to do with getting more votes is not like giving up on being president. I don't know. He's always understood that he was trying to create a movement to widen the door, to kick open a door that has been closed, and closed by the dual party system. And you know, he said,
that was a reaction, right? To because I think Kennedy, if he had been allowed to play in the Democratic primary, he would have happily done that. And the thing that I have seen, and the Republicans went through this their own in their own time, right? Like this definitely occurred in the Republican Party as well. The most recent time when it occurred was when Ron Paul wanted to get the endorsement. They did not let him play in their primary process the way that they should have let him. This is not siloed to the Democratic Party. I saw it firsthand in the Republican Party and saw the disaffection that so many people had related to the process. And so I think, you know, his going out and saying, well, if you're not going to let me participate, then I'm going to bring awareness to this as well as just continue to run, because I think that I have the ability to win outside of this, you know, process. And so I think that he would have preferred to have stayed within the existing rails of how things work. But, you know, he got booted to the outside of it. And we've seen this with Ron Paul. We've seen this with also with Bernie Sanders, and now again with RFK. Like this has got to be fixed. Like we have to have a political process in the United States that allows for candidates to be selected by the grassroots, by the people who are interested in the candidate. And I think Trump was actually one of those candidates that the Republican Party didn't want, but as a reaction from what happened with Ron Paul and the whole rise of the Tea Party movement, they no longer had control. So hopefully this kind of a thing wrests control from the Democrats. But I think it's unfortunate they've got like those super delegates and all that kind of stuff that sets the party up for this long structure. This can't go away, but maybe it's just losses after losses is the only thing that's going to bring them around.
Well, I think a wonderful thing about the age of Donald Trump and Kennedy here is they will be looking towards their legacy with regards to ballot access. And I doubt that either of them wants to or believes in the legacy of their power as being able to lock other third party or alternative views out in the future.
Well, one of the interesting things that's come about as a result of this move is seeing Kennedy all over the place now, where he was stonewalled in the major media. Now he's on Fox News and he's been on a variety of different outlets. And he's talking about the stuff he cares about, right? He really does care about the health of the nation. He cares about what is going on with the capture of federal agencies. And so now that message is starting to come out even more strongly, and they're not sidelining him as much as they had been before now that this move has occurred. So I mean, it seems like some of the stuff that he really cared about he's now able to talk about.
Absolutely. I've seen clips of Kennedy emerge that I hadn't caught in 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 the time that I've been following him in the last year and a half. He wasn't, I guess I sort of bought into the narrative of of a of a superficial understanding of the points that he was making before he began running for office. But once I started looking into it, I was very I found his arguments and concerns compelling. So it's been amazing to see so many clips in which he's been right. And um, well, I don't know if I told you so is worth it in politics, but I I'm looking forward to what he does with the Trump administration. And it's changed the tenor of Donald Trump a bit too. Which, by the way, Donald Trump tweeted out a couple of times in the old trolling Trump style, either yesterday or on Saturday. But I also caught an interview with him, and his guard was not as, or he wasn't as defensive as he often is in interviews. And I don't think that is because he's a defensive person or an aggressive person or any of the attacks that have been laid against him. I think it's been because people have been unwilling to listen to his concerns or to give credence to the way that he describes and looks at the world. Um,
Was it any of these particular ones that caught your eye? Which was the one that you were thinking of?
Oh yeah, there were several in succession that were just in yeah, Comrade Kamala. I think he said Tampon Tim. Donald Trump he's hilarious. He was funny to listen to in his conversation with Elon Musk. That was one of the most impressive things that I took away from that conversation. And I'm not I like it's not locker room humor that he's trotting out. He both is I don't know. He has great leitmotifs like all of his names for Kamala, all of. I often thought that if he would have summed up Bobby Kennedy with some sort of nickname, it's brilliant um, how he sums up a person in a few short words. But Tampon Tim was pretty darn funny. Um, And Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I had thought like it would have been great if he had called Bobby Kennedy Jr. and he would have been doing him a favor. That would have given him an identity somewhat separate from his father, Bobby Kennedy. But anyway, yeah, Donald Trump was back on X in style yesterday. I guess it was 20 hours ago. So
That's another thing that I've been seeing a lot of the Democrats or a lot of the posts around X coming about is the negative or trying to put a negative stance on the alliance between Trump and Elon. And they're saying that it's kind of a great combination of multiple people coming together. Trump's just not trying to go out and get RFK's support. He's also trying to get Elon's support. He was talking about maybe putting Elon in a position of cabinet and things that he could do to try to control the government spending. And, the way that they're coming together saying, okay, if the Democratic Party hates all these people, well, why don't we just get them all together and see what happens? Because, they're all not that really bad of people if you get down to it. They're just being portrayed in a bad stance because the Republic or the Democratic, billionaires are unhappy with the way that they're getting their money.
well, there's the tension between a great check, maybe the fifth estate is truly corporations, and people who hate Citizens United might hate me for saying that, but the the United States Treasury is responsible for all the money that's been printed, and also the political policies that keep it in the hands of the oligarchy. So, but a great check on nation states or governments are corporations, and corporations in some way act like churches. I mean, we don't necessarily have to show up on X, and monopolies can be a problem, but part of the resiliency of the United States and the federal ties of a commercial system binding these states together was understanding that the different states would lead to options for people who could move about between them. So, and I'm dubious of Elon Musk. I mean, also think in that conversation with Donald Trump, how he was very quick to throw forth his solutions and some of his companies, and he wanted to talk about interests that were aligned with his companies. But it's wonderful to have that in an open discussion rather than in closed meetings and redacted reports that it takes years and years and years of litigation to produce. And that's what the Biden administration has been guilty of, and were engaged in from the day that Joe Biden stepped into the White House. So I see you bring up Pavel Durov, and
Yeah, I thought that this might bridge us to the second half of our discussion, because we had another, related, I guess, event that occurred where we're talking about political speech and free speech, whether Kennedy has the right to run a campaign, how this is working out. And now we have this other thing that just happened where France picks up Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram, right? Um, I'm not sure about this, the way that it's being phrased here, in encrypted, uncensored Telegram platform. But regardless, this is a chilling thing to have happened. Anytime we have speech platforms being censored or in any way threatened, it's not a good day for the world and the free exchange of ideas amongst a free people.
well, I think Pavel Durov is interesting. Regardless of the amount of encryption or invulnerability that his company was providing for people who engaged, who used Telegram as a platform for speech. He had not colluded with nation states to give them access, and while while the likes of Apple iOS um, Proton Mail, uh, Google, other more secure players are, they have worked with governments to give those governments access when they wanted it. And so I think that Pavel Durov's independence in that regard makes him very interesting. And I find also what's very interesting. He was born in Italy. His parents had fled Russia in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and as Russia reemerged from that political chaos, they moved back to Russia. And he, I'm not sure what age he returned to Russia, but he created the Russian Facebook, VK. I forget what the word is in Russian. And rather than give the Russian government access to VK or backdoors into VK, he sold it and created Telegram because he wanted to ensure private communication between dissidents. Yeah, there we go. Von whatever. And he came to the United States because he thought that the protections that were afforded social media platforms in section 230, would protect him. But once he came to the United States, he realized that the quid pro quo for that protection of the United States government for the social media platforms was to give the United States government backdoors and access into those platforms whenever they wanted it. And so rather than accede to that, he moved to the United Arab Emirates. And the flight or his seeking of a place in which the government could not touch him and he could create a company that was free of the touch of the government, I think is a narrative of liberty, of quote unquote sovereignty that, or is a narrative of sovereignty that has replaced one of liberty. And I don't know that the narrative of sovereignty holds true, because at some point, you have to work with your neighbors, and that is
well, when you said to put "The Man Without a Country" as part of the title, I thought that was interesting because I think of the one like true individual that really comes to my mind whenever I think about a man without a country. I think of John McAfee, this pirate dude that's out there just sailing the pirate flag and cruising around in the Caribbean with guns and off on his own. But then you think about what that really means to be without a nation, without a home to call your own, and that you're kind of, I don't know, like a beggar on the high seas. It's what are you really going to do if you don't have a place to call home and you don't have a country that accepts you as your own? Then you really are at the mercy of just like any place you can moor your boat, I suppose.
and how, I mean, John McAfee was, I believe, wasn't he killed in Costa Rica? Wasn't he murdered in Costa Rica? I forget.
I'll pull up the Wikipedia page. Let's see what it's got.
Yeah, see what that's got. Also, if you would, pull up Clement Vallandigham, because The Man Without a Country it's a short story. Movies have been made from the short story, but the short story was written about an actual American, and that American was Clement Vallandigham, and he was a representative from the state of Ohio leading into the Civil War, who did not support from a northern state, mind you, Ohio, who did not, and Ohio is also the seat of the radical Republicans, where the party of Lincoln came from, and he did not support the war, and so in order to deal with him, Lincoln exiled him, and he fled to Canada, and from Canada ran for the governor of Ohio. What would Polymarket have said about Clement Bellingham? He didn't win the governorship, but how interesting would it have been if he had won the governorship? Yeah, go ahead. We'll go back.
So McAfee was ruled to have committed suicide. I don't believe this for 1 second. This is not the kind of person who would commit suicide. I'm pretty sure he repeatedly said that he would never do that. And he was found dead in Spain. I think, isn't this what I believe it's saying? A Spanish court ruled that it was by suicide, and that he was on his way to being extradited to the United States.
Well, I've heard stories about what happened to McAfee ever since that. And McAfee did he create Netscape? Did he create Netscape, or just the McAfee antivirus?
I think he just did the antivirus software. I don't think he. Let's see. Yeah, to Libertarian Party, McAfee antivirus software. I don't think he had anything to do with that.
Maybe it was just Andreessen who was with Firefox or Netscape or whatever we call it today. But anyway, also think about CrowdStrike and well, if a government is looking for backdoors or access into operating systems and applications that are built on those operating systems, maybe an antivirus software is a good place to use to keep your keys or to gain access to that. So who knows what happened with McAfee? But at the same, like he was fighting with his home country. To bring it back forward, not to get too far off on Clement Bellingham and John McAfee, when Pavel Durov was arrested by the French, and I don't know that he's been charged with. I haven't, or the charges have not been made public. But immediately when that happened, Vladimir Putin was adamant that France was abusing the rights of a citizen of Russia, and Russian politicians have said, regardless of whether you believed you were one of our own, you are Russian, and you created the Russian Facebook and have created wonderful tools for Russia, and they might have, who knows what the narrative or the story would have been between Pavel Durov and his brother in their dealings with the nation of Russia, but Russia has claimed them and wants to protect them, and there are other people who were brought to my mind with the Durov story, and those are both Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. And Julian Assange is now back in Australia, but he was pursued by the United States for many years for his creation of WikiLeaks and publishing information gained from information about the Iraq War. But in the story of Julian Assange, I was always dismayed that part of the narrative was that Australia did nothing to protect their citizen. They worked to create a security state and a partnership with the United States, but they did nothing to protect Julian Assange.
I think Australia has had one of the worst track records for countries as far as things that have been happening recently. Didn't they have one of the more egregious policies with respect to vaccines and COVID and lockdown and whatever? I thought they were scored extremely poorly in that whole situation.
I didn't.
They were terrible on COVID in Australia. They forced people to mandate, and they would throw people in jail if they even left their homes. And I think they prosecute people with drones in Australia.
Yeah, they were really bad. I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. Like Australia is not some bastion
Yeah,
of
yeah, I'm agreeing
freedom.
with you too. They were definitely totalitarian with their response to COVID, and were one of the more direct countries that forced people to go their way or the highway, basically, and enforced it into all their citizens.
Yeah, and I think New Zealand is following hot on the heels of that as being, one of the more egregious, as when it comes to this kind of stuff and autonomy and whatever. So it's really beginning to look like there's nowhere to flee or retreat to. It's like we just this is the fight of our lifetime. Is we've got to continue to stand up for personal liberty and freedom wherever you live, because there's not some great place that you can just run to and say, well, if I go here, then I'm going to be free. It's like, yeah, every place that you would think that would be a part of the free world, it's sort of, there's some issue with something going on there. So I don't know, like this idea that you can go somewhere else and it's going to be better there. You probably just you gotta fight the fight in every place. And in France particularly, like this should not be something that the French people let stand, because if you don't have the ability to say what you want to say, I think you're at high risk to having the rest of your freedoms taken away additionally.
Well, I think this in France has everything to do with the contentious narrative over whether France supports Israel or Hamas, and that's actually what's at stake here. But with regards to Australia and New Zealand and other countries' COVID responses, I have a lot of opinions about the American response to COVID, and especially Colorado's response to COVID, because that's where I was at the time. Texas's response to COVID, because that's where my family largely was at the time. But I'm reticent to point fingers and tell Australians or New Zealanders what their response should have been, because I'm not from Australia, and Pavel Durov is not from the United Arab Emirates, and he's not from France. Maybe he has a claim to Italy because he was born there, but we should be wary in the projection of the narrative of liberty in telling others what to do. This is part of the grand psyop of talking about democracy instead of liberty. And look at the interview that Merrick Garland gave on Friday in with regards to the Unity Party ticket, in which he said that the Justice Department was going to defend democracy whatever the cost, and proceeded to talk about the number of convictions that the Department of Justice had engaged in the wake of January the 6th, and said, well, there will be no future January 6s. That if the I don't know, the at if we talk about liberty, then it's something that we should show, but we should also understand that liberty doesn't go to the self. I mean, if people can move around the world, they're moving into communities of people no matter where they go. And it's one thing to be from somewhere and to engage in the political discussion about how things ought to work, but it's another thing to just move to Costa Rica and say, or let's bring it to now, move to Venezuela and say, well, I don't like Nicolas Maduro. I want Machado as the president. This is what the United States has done to take advantage of countries around the world for some time. So we need to be wary of telling other people how to engage in liberty and being an example of it ourselves. But even in the United States, obviously, like, liberty only goes so far. When I am, when I'm in my hometown, I don't necessarily want people to be able to move in and to change things. And this is part of the conversation about immigration that we have in the United States today. and that conversation is focused largely on foreign nationals. I mean, what is the word foreign in a world of liberty? Um, but when people tell me that that Chinese nationals coming in, or South American nationals, and other people who have entered illegally are in the United States, I say, well, in Colorado we have a problem with people from California and people from Connecticut and New York and Maryland and places where money gets made. So the liberty comes with some problems, um and I don't know, we live in a world that wants liberty, but we need to start thinking about, can we have multiple citizenships? What is the cost of moving into an area like what is the relationship between global corporations that span across multiple nations? So maybe the correlation to a man without a country now is we have too many men with too many countries, and that's become our new problem.
Perhaps so. You said you wanted me to bring up one thing. I just want to make sure I get that through. It was Clement Vallandigham. Is that
Bellingham. It's over in our private chat in the links there. Yeah, you might bring that up, because Clement Bellingham is a very interesting person that I doubt many people are aware of in the United States. The Copperheads were the anti-war Democrats from the North, and Clement Bellingham was exiled from the United States by Abraham Lincoln, and exiled because he was a Northerner who had too much Northern support for not engaging in the Civil War, or not having a Civil War. And Clement Vallandigham is also very interesting, because he would later become the start of the Department of Education. Another great story, as I'm glancing at this Wikipedia article, Clement Vallandigham accidentally shot himself when he was representing a client who was accused of shooting somebody in a barroom brawl. And when drawing the pistol out to show how the gun could have been inadvertently triggered by getting caught on the clothing, being pulled from a waistband, he actually shot himself in the stomach, and or else we might have seen him emerge, and be part of the later political conversation in the wake of the Civil War. But very interesting person, and the seed for the short story "A Man Without a Country" that I would say most American school children know to this day, and was once remembered for the important questions that were raised leading into the Civil War. If he was a voice of dissent in the North leading into the Civil War, and
well, if there's anything I've learned from my discussions with you and getting more into U.S. history, it's that the Civil War was the sea change for this republic, and many of the things that we would say looks like how we would lament and would wish things were different. And I'm not speaking to like bringing back slavery. I'm talking about the ways that our country used to be governed, the way it used to run. A lot of these changes came about as a result of what was going on in the Civil War. So it definitely is important that we learn about history and that we know how the Civil War really changed a lot about the United States, and even stuff that we've discussed in the past with respect to how money worked and how income taxes were imposed. Like so much of what people are stewing about in America these days have deep roots in this last great conflict that occurred on our shore.
Well, and I think it's going to be a more that we need to constantly go back to the Civil War and look at the the political power structure leading into the Civil War, because in the did we rewrite the Constitution after the Civil War? We created a couple of amendments, and one of the supposed solutions coming out of the Civil War was to create an amendment that gave citizenship of citizens of the various states citizenship to the United States, but that didn't change the question of who had power over bodies at the state level. And so, again, interesting to think about the cases that we've brought up today and compare that to this narrative that one is free to go, is sovereign unto themselves and free to move about everywhere. I don't know that holds true. And so I think it's very important to look at concepts like habeas corpus, who has actual control over bodies, and how that continues to legally play out today. When somebody is murdered in a state in these United States, it's the state that charges for murder. And not only that, the state, part of the reasoning of the state is because they're out of a worker. They're deprived of someone who could have been adding to the economic viability of that state. And so if your father who has Alzheimer's murders your mother because he wakes up and is confused in the night, this is a case in Alabama, by the way, the children don't get to say, well, dad has Alzheimer's and he killed mom. No, the state says a man killed a woman and this was the woman's economic value to the state.
Wild thought to end with, but yeah, I think we got to wrap it up for today. But excited for our discussion tomorrow. We'll have to see what we bring up.
All right, see you tomorrow.